So we are finally back. It feels like an age since I last did one of these. And hopefully that'll be the drought over with. As with new phone in hand, Ricky's Reviews 2.0 is born. And as this is somewhat of a new beginning for the channel, I thought we'd go all the way back to where the UK craft beer scene first started. As we take another trip to the beautiful Thornbridge Hall with another fab collab. This time with Cheltenham's finest, Deya. Combining their two most iconic brews, today we have Steady on the Jaips. Now I remember being blown away when I first tried Steady Rolling Man. It was definitely one of the best beers I'd had that year. But here's where I may get a little controversial. Because as much as I did love Steady Rolling, I can't quite say the same for Jaips. And I know to some people that might sound like straight up heresy. And it's not to say that I dislike it either. It just doesn't hold such a dear place in my heart that it does with many other people in the community. And I do definitely think this is somewhat of a generational thing, as by the time I did have my first Jaips, the UK craft revolution was well in swing. That, and I had already visited the West Coast. And I'm not such a big cask drinker, which is where Jaips really shines. But in my defense of that, I put that more down to the kind of pubs I was drinking in my early days and not down to cask beer itself. But we shall move swiftly on before I drop any more unpopular opinions. That's assuming there's anyone else still watching that hasn't already completely clicked off in disgust. So, here she is, Steady on the Jaips. It's an amped up version of the two classics. So expecting some of those big tropical juicy notes from the Rolling Man and a classic bitter and citrus of Jaips. The last Thornbridge collab was phenomenal and I'm expecting this to be even better. So let's find out. Let's get pouring. So that is very tropical on the nose. Getting nice waves of pineapple in there. And a subtle note of cream just in behind. It's also got a wonderful golden appearance. Quite hazy too, as you'd expect. So yeah, that pineapple, it's the first thing that really tickles the tongue. And you can definitely feel it's been amped up. It does feel somewhat of that 8%, you can definitely get a feel for it. And just there and behind it, that bitterness of citrus. And it is really juicy in the mouth. And it does have a light piney and subtle maltiness to it. And it is very smooth drinking. Now there are 9 whole hops in this one. Never done a head count before, but I've got to imagine that's got to be up there with some of the highest I've ever had in a single beer before. And now the beer started to settle a little bit, that tail has really started to bite. It's got a piney grapefruit bitterness in the finish. And there's also just a very subtle dankness in there. I'm gonna guess that's because of the ABV, just giving it a little bit of a punch. Yeah, there is a whole lot of grapefruit really starting to make an appearance now. And that big juicy mouth of earlier, it's changed now. It's become much more piney and it's a much drier on the tongue. it's really starting to feel like a very different beer. So it kicks off really juicy up top. Lots of these big tropical notes on show. And there's a subtle piney citrus in the finish. But boy, does it switch up on you. Because midway through, those juicy notes do start to fade and are replaced by much more bitter and citrus notes. Grapefruit really at the fore. And that ABV really starts to pull its weight. And with it, a wave of dankness. And it does give a really different feel, even on the tongue. It goes from an early smoothness to a piney and dry, lingering mouth. It does definitely capture the feel of two very different beers. And of course, it is balanced excellently, as you'd expect from two absolute masters of their craft. But I just don't feel blown away. Well, that is a lie. That booze definitely has me feeling a little giddy. It's just, I'm not left feeling this is a beer I really need to seek again. Yes, it's a dipper, not a session, so I'm not expecting I'd want one straight after, but I'm definitely not ready to crown it the dipper of dippers. I did have high expectations here, and maybe that has worked against me a little. But it's just dippers, they're very commonplace now. And it pains me to say it, but this one is just another one in the crowd.